think of the word dinosaur, what image springs to mind? For most of us, it is a picture shaped by movies, comic books, and museum displays from 50 years ago. We see sluggish, tail-dragging giants that roared in the swamps, their green, scaly skin glistening in the sun. We imagine monsters that were too stupid to adapt, too slow to survive, and eventually doomed to extinction. But here is the shocking truth. Almost everything you just visualized is wrong. The real animals were faster, stranger, and far more impressive than the monsters of Hollywood. They were covered in feathers, they were incredibly smart, and they are still with us today. Hello everyone, Alex here. Welcome to Dinosaurs, Beyond the Myths, an audiobook dedicated to stripping away the fiction to reveal the astonishing reality of the prehistoric world. We are going to challenge everything you thought you knew about these magnificent creatures. We will look at the evidence, the bones, and the new technologies that are rewriting history every single day. If you are ready to have your mind changed about the past, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the revelations we have in store. Before we dive into the science, I want to hear from you. What is the one dinosaur myth you grew up believing that you later found out wasn't true? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's start shattering some misconceptions. For over a century, the dominant image of the dinosaur was that of a sluggish, dim-witted reptile. In the early 20th century, paleontologists painted a picture of animals that were so heavy they could barely support their own weight. They were depicted as cold-blooded creatures that needed to bask in the sun just to get moving, essentially resembling giant, sluggish lizards. This view became the standard for decades, embedded in our culture and our textbooks. But this image could not be further from the truth. The reality began to emerge in the late 1960s, in what is now known as the dinosaur renaissance. Scientists started looking at the bones not as static stones, but as clues to an active lifestyle. When we examine the microscopic structure of dinosaur bone, we see something remarkable. We see rapid growth rates. We see fibrolamellar bone, a tissue type that is laid down very quickly. This is the kind of bone you find in warm-blooded mammals and birds, not in slow-growing reptiles. This suggests that dinosaurs didn't take a century to reach full size. Many grew incredibly fast, sometimes gaining hundreds of pounds in a single year. To sustain that kind of growth, they needed a high metabolic rate. They weren't just cold-blooded relying on the sun, nor were they fully warm-blooded like us. They likely occupied a middle ground, mesothermy. This unique physiological state allowed them to maintain high activity levels without the massive caloric cost of being a mammal. It was the key to their success. It meant they could be active hunters, fast runners, and dominant in almost every environment on Earth. Furthermore, their posture gives away their secret. Unlike lizards, which sprawl their legs out to the side, dinosaurs stood upright. Their legs were positioned directly under their bodies, like a horse or a dog. This alignment allowed for efficient, energy-saving movement. They were not dragging their tails through the mud. Their tails were held high, acting as counterbalances and rudders. The myth of the slow, stumbling giant is just that, a myth. The real dinosaur was an athlete, a biological machine built for speed and endurance. One of the most pervasive and stubborn myths is that all dinosaurs looked like scaly dragons. For generations, illustrators painted them with smooth, reptilian skin, devoid of any fuzz or plumage. It was an easy assumption to make since reptiles today have scales. But science has a way of overturning our easiest assumptions. In the last 20 years, we have uncovered a truth that has fundamentally reshaped our understanding of what these animals looked like. Dinosaurs had feathers. It started with a fossil called Sinosauropteryx, found in China. It was a small carnivore, and remarkably, it preserved a halo of filaments around its tail and body. These were not scales. They were primitive feathers, stiff bristles almost like the spines of a hedgehog. Since that discovery, we have found thousands of fossils from the Liaoning province showing feathers on all sorts of dinosaurs. It wasn't just the small ones either. We have found giant tyrannosaurs that were covered in feathers. A relative of the Tyrannosaurus rex named Eutyrannus was a 27-foot-long predator covered in a coat of downy white plumage. Imagine a 9-ton beast looking more like a giant, terrifying teddy bear than a scaly monster. These feathers weren't necessarily for flight, they were for insulation. In the cool, Mesozoic evenings, a coat of feathers would keep a large animal warm and allow it to grow faster by conserving heat. This changes the aesthetic of the prehistoric world entirely. Instead of a drab, green and brown landscape, the Cretaceous would have been alive with color. Feathers are excellent for display. Some dinosaurs might have had iridescent colors like a peacock or patterns for camouflage. We now know that birds are not just related to dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. The line between them is blurred completely. The scaly monsters of our childhood movies have been replaced by feathered, bird-like animals that were far more complex and beautiful than we ever imagined. Now, let us turn our gaze to the most famous dinosaur of all, Tyrannosaurus rex. The movies have taught us to fear the king of the dinosaurs as a relentless, scaly monster with a roar that shakes the earth. But recent scientific discoveries are forcing us to reevaluate the face of this iconic predator. For decades, artists drew the T-Rex with its massive teeth exposed permanently, giving it a fearsome, lipless grin. However, the latest research suggests that this view is incorrect. When we look at the anatomy of living predators like crocodiles and lizards, we see exposed teeth because they have flat skulls and no room for lips. But the skull of a Tyrannosaurus is shaped more like that of a Komodo dragon or even a mammal predator. The bone texture suggests the presence of soft tissue. It turns out that the T-Rex likely had lips, fleshy scales that covered its teeth when its mouth was closed. This would have kept the teeth moist and healthy. So, instead of a grinning skull, imagine a giant mouth that looks normal until it opens to strike. Another myth revolves around its eyes. In many films, the T-Rex is depicted as having vision based on movement, unable to see something standing still. This is pure fiction. In reality, the Tyrannosaurus had the best binocular vision of any land animal we have ever studied. Its eyes faced forward, giving it depth perception comparable to a modern hawk. It could see you standing still from miles away. And what about its roar? While it seems cinematic, giant reptiles today don't roar like lions. They hiss, rumble, or produce low-frequency infrasonic booms that travel for miles and vibrate through your chest. The vocal box of a dinosaur was likely very different from a lion's, so the real king of the dinosaurs probably sounded less like a monster in a movie and more like a terrifyingly low-pitched rumble that you felt in your bones before you ever heard it with your ears. If Tyrannosaurus rex is the misunderstood king, then Velociraptor is the misunderstood assassin. Thanks to a certain blockbuster film franchise, most people picture the Velociraptor as a human-sized, cunning, scaly hunter that could open doors and communicate in complex packs. The reality is starkly different. The movie monster was actually based on a larger dinosaur called Deinonychus. The real Velociraptor was much smaller, about the size of a turkey. But the differences go deeper than just size. The movie raptors were smooth and leathery. The real velociraptor has been found with clear evidence of feathers. It had long, wing-like feathers on its arms and a fan of feathers on its tail. It looked less like a nightmare lizard and more like a giant, predatory eagle. This changes our view of how it hunted. Instead of just running and slashing with toe claws, it may have used its wings for stability, balance, or even to flap and gain traction while pinning down smaller prey. The myth of the military pack is also being questioned. While some evidence suggests social behavior in certain raptor species, the idea of coordinated tactical assaults like a SEAL team is a stretch. It is more likely they were opportunistic, perhaps mobbing a larger threat or hunting alone like modern birds of prey. They were incredibly smart for their time, but their intelligence was likely comparable to that of a modern bird or coyote, not a human tactical genius. The true horror of the velociraptor was not its ability to open doors, but its specialized weapon. The famous sickle claw on its second toe was indeed lethal, but it was probably used for climbing or puncturing vital points on prey, rather than disemboweling with a single swipe. It was a precision instrument used by a fast, agile, feathered predator, perfectly adapted for catching small, fast animals in the ancient scrublands of Mongolia. We have tackled their appearance, but what about their minds? For a long time, dinosaurs were dismissed as pea-brained idiots, evolutionary failures that were too stupid to survive. This view was based on the assumption that they were reptiles, and reptiles generally have smaller brains relative to their body size. But once again, this is a myth that ignores the diversity of the group. Dinosaurs showed a wide range of intelligence. While it is true that the giant sauropods like Brachiosaurus had relatively small brains, they didn't need to be smart. They had few predators and lived in a predictable world of endless food. However, the theropods, the meat eaters, tell a different story. The troodon, a small wolf-sized predator, had one of the largest brains relative to its body size of any dinosaur. It had large eyes and likely had excellent depth perception and night vision. Scientists speculate it may have been one of the smartest animals of the Cretaceous. More importantly, the behavior of dinosaurs suggests a social intelligence that rivals modern mammals. We have found massive bone beds of Centrosaurus containing thousands of individuals that died together in a flood. This suggests they lived in herds, traveling together for protection and migration. Living in a herd requires social cues, communication, and hierarchy. Even more compelling is the evidence of parental care. The discovery of Maiasaura, the good mother lizard, in Montana revolutionized this field. We found nests containing babies of different ages. This told us that the parents were feeding the hatchlings at the nest, bringing food back until the young were old enough to leave. This level of parental investment is complex behavior. It is not the act of a dumb lizard. It is the act of a nurturing animal caring for its offspring, a characteristic trait of birds and mammals. The dinosaurs were not just solitary monsters. They were parents, partners, and social creatures. Before we move to the final chapters of our journey, I want to ask you something. We've discussed feathers, lips, and intelligence. Which of these realizations changes your mental image of dinosaurs the most? Is it the thought of a Tyrannosaurus with lips or a raptor covered in feathers? Let us know in the comments what myth surprised you the most. One of the most enduring scenes in dinosaur cinema is the chase. We see a massive Tyrannosaurus Rex running at high speed, chasing a jeep or a speeding car. The physics of this scenario are problematic. While we have established that dinosaurs were active and athletic, there is a limit to what biology can do. The myth of the super-speed dinosaur needs to be reined in by the laws of physics. Biomechanics, the study of how biological structures move, has given us new tools to estimate speed. When an animal runs, it puts stress on its bones. If the stress is too high, the bones snap. For a 6-ton Tyrannosaurus, running at 40 or 50 miles per hour would likely have shattered its leg bones. While it was fast, its top speed was probably closer to 15 to 20 miles per hour. This is still incredibly fast for a creature of that size, comparable to a sprinting elephant, but it is not the cheetah-like blur seen in movies. However, this doesn't make them less dangerous. Many dinosaurs used different strategies. The hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, were likely the marathon runners. They had powerful legs and could sustain a steady trot for miles, using their speed and stamina to escape predators. Conversely, the ankylosaurs didn't run at all. They were living tanks, covered in armor, relying on a low center of gravity to stay safe. We also have the myth of the tail dragger. For a long time, dinosaurs were drawn with their tails dragging on the ground because they were thought to be too weak to lift them. In reality, their tails were rigid structures supported by ossified tendons. A sauropod's tail acted as a cantilever, extending far behind the animal to balance its immense neck. A diplodocus could move its tail with the force of a whip, potentially breaking the sound barrier, a defensive weapon called a bullwhip crack. These animals were masters of their own bodies, using physics and biomechanics to move efficiently, even if they didn't break the sound barrier with their feet. The final, and perhaps most pervasive myth, is that the dinosaurs went completely extinct. We often speak of the asteroid impact 66 million years ago as the day the dinosaurs died. It is true that the non-avian dinosaurs, the giant sauropods, the armored ankylosaurs, and the terrifying theropods, vanished. But a small lineage survived. When the dust settled and the nuclear winter ended, the forests were burning, and the giants were gone. But hiding in burrows, nesting in trees, and sheltering in the water were the survivors. They were the small, feathered dinosaurs we now call birds. They had high metabolisms, they could fly to escape the fires, and they could adapt their diets. They survived the apocalypse. Every bird you see outside your window is a dinosaur. A chicken is more closely related to Tyrannosaurus rex than a lizard is. This is not a metaphor, it is a scientific fact. The lineage continued. The feathers we discussed earlier? Birds kept them. The hollow bones? Birds have them. The respiratory system? Birds are still using that efficient lung design, so the myth of total extinction is false. The dinosaurs are still with us, dominating the skies. They lost their size and their teeth, but they won the survival game. Understanding this connection changes how we see the natural world today. You are not just watching a sparrow. You are watching a living relic of the Mesozoic era, a tiny survivor that outlasted the giants. How do we know all of this? For a long time, paleontology was simply digging up bones and guessing at the shapes of the monsters. But today, we have technology that allows us to look inside the fossils. We use CT scans to peer into brain cases, mapping out the shape of the brain to determine intelligence and sensory capabilities. We use advanced computer modeling to test bite forces and muscle strength. We also look at the field of biomolecular paleontology. In a few rare cases, scientists have found soft tissue preserved inside dinosaur bones, including blood vessels and collagen proteins. This is a field that is in its infancy, but it holds the promise of telling us what color they truly were. While we have already found melanosomes, pigment structures in feathers, that tell us some were red, white, and black, we are hoping to learn even more. However, we must also acknowledge what we don't know. There are still mysteries. We don't know exactly what all of them sounded like. We don't know if the biggest sauropods migrated across continents. Science is a process of asking questions and finding evidence, and for every answer we find, 3 new questions arise. The story of the dinosaurs is not a story of failure. It is a story of incredible success and survival. They ruled the planet for 160 million years, evolving into forms stranger than science fiction. By moving beyond the myths, we finally give them the credit they deserve. They were not monsters. They were living, breathing, evolving animals that deserve to be studied with respect and wonder. Thank you for listening to Dinosaurs Beyond the Myths. I hope this journey has changed how you see the prehistoric world. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please leave a like and subscribe for more deep dives into history and science. And tell me, now that you know the truth, do you think the real dinosaurs are more interesting than the movie versions? Leave a comment below. Until next time, keep looking at the world with curiosity.